In a world where every notification, every passing comment, and every minor setback feels like a dagger to our self-worth, we are drowning in a culture of overreaction, a society where the smallest ripple becomes a tidal wave of self-sabotage. And the book, Stop Letting Everything Affect You, arrives like a lifeline thrown into stormy seas, reminding us that resilience is not a luxury but a necessity. That the ability to stand firm against the chaos of modern life is the difference between living with purpose and collapsing under pressure. Because the truth is simple yet brutal. If you allow every external force to dictate your internal state, you will never build the habits, the focus, or the courage required to achieve anything meaningful. And this book confronts that epidemic head-on, showing us how to break free from the invisible prison of emotional fragility, how to stop sabotaging ourselves with overthinking, and how to reclaim the power to decide what truly matters. Because in the end, the greatest battle is not against the world, but against the weakness within. And if you can master that, you can master anything. The first principle in Stop Letting Everything Affect You is the art of emotional detachment, the ability to separate your identity from the chaos of external events. Because most people live as if every passing opinion, every minor inconvenience, every unexpected delay is a personal attack. And this constant absorption of negativity becomes the fuel for self-sabotage. Yet the truth is that resilience begins when you stop confusing external noise with internal truth. When you recognize that your worth is not determined by traffic jams, rude coworkers, or the endless scroll of social media. And the book insists that emotional detachment is not coldness, but clarity, not indifference, but discipline. Because when you learn to pause before reacting, when you create a gap between stimulus and response, you reclaim the power to choose. And that choice is the foundation of strength, illustrated through examples of leaders who remain calm under fire, athletes who thrive under pressure, and everyday individuals who refuse to let small frustrations derail their larger mission. And this principle echoes the wisdom of Stoicism while sharpening it for the modern age, reminding us that the world will always throw storms our way, but it is our decision whether to stand firm or collapse. And if you can master detachment, you can begin to dismantle the cycle of self-sabotage that has held you hostage for years. The second principle in Stop Letting Everything Affect You is mastering the discipline of perspective. Because most self-sabotage begins when we magnify small problems into catastrophic narratives, when a single rejection becomes proof of unworthiness, when a minor delay becomes evidence that life is against us. And this distorted lens is the silent killer of progress. Yet the book insists that perspective is the weapon that cuts through illusion, reminding us that setbacks are not verdicts, but lessons, that criticism is not condemnation, but feedback, and that every obstacle can be reframed as training for resilience, illustrated through stories of entrepreneurs who turned failures into billion-dollar companies, athletes who saw defeat as fuel for future victories, and ordinary people who refused to let temporary pain define permanent identity. And this principle echoes the wisdom of cognitive psychology while sharpening it into cinematic clarity. Because when you learn to step back, to zoom out, to see the bigger picture, you realize that most of what derails us is not the event itself, but the story we tell about it. And if you can rewrite that story, if you can choose a perspective that empowers rather than weakens, you dismantle the cycle of self-sabotage and begin to build a mindset that thrives under pressure. Because perspective is not just how you see the world, it is the lens that determines whether you rise or collapse. The third principle in Stop Letting Everything Affect You is the discipline of boundaries. Because without clear lines between what belongs to you and what belongs to others, you will forever be at the mercy of external chaos, absorbing every emotion, every demand, every expectation, until your identity dissolves into exhaustion. And the book insists that boundaries are not walls, but shields, not isolation, but preservation. Because when you learn to say no without guilt, when you learn to protect your time, your energy, and your focus, you begin to dismantle the cycle of self-sabotage that thrives on overcommitment and resentment. Illustrated through examples of professionals who burned out by saying yes to everything, relationships that collapsed under the weight of unspoken limits, and individuals who rediscovered freedom by drawing firm lines around their priorities. And this principle echoes the wisdom of modern psychology while sharpening it into cinematic clarity, reminding us that boundaries are not selfish but essential. That protecting your inner world is the only way to contribute meaningfully to the outer world. And if you can master boundaries, you reclaim the power to decide what enters your life and what does not, transforming chaos into order and weakness into strength. Because boundaries are the architecture of resilience, the invisible fortress that allows you to stand firm in a world that constantly tries to pull you apart. The fourth principle in Stop Letting Everything Affect You is the discipline of focus. Because in a world engineered to fracture attention into 1,000 pieces, the ability to concentrate on what truly matters has become the rarest and most valuable skill. And the book insists that focus is not simply about productivity, but about identity. Because what you choose to give your attention to becomes the architecture of your life. And if you allow distractions, negativity, and trivial noise to dominate your mental landscape, you will sabotage your own progress before it ever begins. Illustrated through examples of creators who built empires by dedicating themselves to one craft. Athletes who rose to greatness by refusing to scatter their energy, and everyday individuals who transformed their lives by eliminating distractions and committing to a single mission. And this principle echoes the wisdom of Deep Work by Cal Newport while sharpening it into cinematic clarity, reminding us that focus is not about doing more, but about doing what matters. That every yes to distraction is a no to destiny. And if you can master focus, you dismantle the cycle of self-sabotage that thrives on scattered energy, reclaiming the power to build momentum, to create depth, and to achieve results that others only dream of. Because focus is the weapon that cuts through chaos, the lens that transforms potential into achievement, and the discipline that separates those who drift from those who dominate. The fifth principle in Stop Letting Everything Affect You is the discipline of self-mastery, because at the core of every act of self-sabotage lies the inability to govern your own impulses, the failure to control the inner storm that turns minor frustrations into major collapses. And the book insists that true strength is not about conquering the world, but about conquering yourself. Because when you learn to master your emotions, your habits, and your reactions, you dismantle the invisible chains that keep you trapped in cycles of weakness. Illustrated through examples of individuals who transformed their lives by refusing to indulge in destructive patterns, leaders who built empires by mastering their tempers, and everyday people who discovered freedom by choosing discipline over indulgence. And this principle echoes the wisdom of atomic habits while sharpening it into cinematic clarity, reminding us that mastery is not about perfection, but about progress, not about suppressing emotion, but about channeling it. Because every time you resist the urge to overreact, every time you choose discipline over chaos, you strengthen the fortress of resilience. And if you can master yourself, you can master anything. Because the greatest enemy is not the world outside, but the weakness within. And once you conquer that, you become unstoppable, a force immune to distraction, immune to sabotage, immune to collapse, standing firm in a world that constantly tries to pull you apart. What makes Stop Letting Everything Affect You stand apart from the crowded shelf of self-help literature is its ruthless focus on emotional resilience. Because while books like Atomic Habits teach us how to build systems of discipline and incremental progress, and while The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Frick urges us to reject societal expectations and embrace selective indifference, and while The Mountain is You explores the inner sabotage that prevents growth, this book cuts deeper into the raw nerve of modern fragility, confronting the epidemic of overreaction and emotional collapse with surgical precision. And unlike Atomic Habits, which emphasizes external routines, this book insists that without internal strength, no habit can survive the storms of life. And unlike The Subtle Art, which often leans on shock value and blunt rejection, this book offers a more structured path to detachment and perspective. And unlike The Mountain is You, which frames sabotage as a hidden enemy, this book exposes it as a daily choice, a decision to let the world dictate your state of mind. And by weaving these comparisons, the commentary proves originality, showing that while other titles orbit around discipline, indifference, or self-discovery, Stop Letting Everything Affect You anchors itself in the battlefield of resilience, teaching us not just how to survive, but how to thrive in a world that constantly tests our strength. And in doing so, it becomes not a repetition, but a revelation, a cinematic manifesto for emotional mastery. The book Stop Letting Everything Affect You does not simply diagnose the problem, it prescribes a battle plan, a 7-day reset designed to break the chains of self-sabotage and rebuild resilience from the ground up. Because change is not born from theory, but from practice. And the first day demands awareness, a brutal audit of how often you let external noise dictate your internal state. The second day demands detachment, practicing the pause before reaction, refusing to let minor irritations hijack your mood. The third day demands perspective, reframing one setback as training, one criticism as feedback, one delay as patience. The fourth day demands boundaries, drawing a line around your time and energy, saying no to distractions and yes to priorities. The fifth day demands focus, eliminating one source of noise, whether it's a toxic feed, a draining habit, or a pointless task, and channeling your energy into one mission. The sixth day demands mastery, choosing discipline over indulgence in one small but significant act, proving to yourself that you can govern your impulses. And the seventh day demands reflection, looking back at the week not with judgment but with clarity, recognizing progress, identifying weaknesses, and committing to repeat the cycle until resilience becomes second nature. Because this plan is not a gimmick, but a blueprint, a cinematic training ground for strength. And if you follow it, you will not only stop letting everything affect you, you will begin to build the fortress of resilience that protects your destiny. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to hold in your hands or stream directly into your ears the full arsenal of strategies from Stop Letting Everything Affect You, how to break free from overthinking, emotional chaos, and self-sabotage, the complete unabridged audiobook is available right now. And I've placed the link in the description below so you can access it instantly. Because this is not just another self-help title, it is a cinematic blueprint for resilience, a training ground for emotional mastery, and listening to it in full will allow you to absorb the principles in their rawest form, narrated with the intensity and clarity that makes every lesson hit harder, every example feel sharper, and every strategy become unforgettable. And as always, transparency matters, so here's the disclosure. As an Amazon associate, I earn from qualifying purchases, and that support fuels the growth of our channel, allowing us to keep creating high-retention, cinematic content for you. So if you decide to grab the audiobook, know that you're not only investing in your own resilience, but also supporting the channel that brings you these deep dive analyses. And the link is waiting in the description. Constructed for compliance, safe hands ready, and designed to bridge seamlessly between your curiosity and your transformation. Because sometimes the smallest click can lead to the biggest change.